Welcome back to This Is Working. I'm Dan Roth, LinkedIn's editor-in-chief. On this show, we talk to leaders who have a significant impact on how we work and how we live. Today, my guest is Marriott CEO Tony Capuano. Last year, Marriott International faced one of the hardest years of its existence. Of course, COVID-19 did to Marriott what it did to so many other companies in the travel and leisure space. It was forced to shutter hotels and lay off workers. But then it faced another tragedy, the death of its longtime and much-loved CEO Arne Sorenson. After some time to grieve, Marriott named Anthony Capuano as its new CEO. He became the fourth leader in the company's 95-year history and faced the daunting task of navigating a global crisis and keeping employees and travelers safe across Marriott's 8,000 properties worldwide. Now, a year into his tenure, Anthony's reflecting on the resilience of his company and on the team he leads. Tony, welcome back.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be back. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So it has been, if I'm not mistaken, this is exactly the 1-year anniversary of you becoming CEO.
That's right. Today is 1 year.
And what have these past 12 months been like?
I was watching with great emotion that little video, and so I might lead with a bit of the last year has been bittersweet. I love this company deeply. It's an honor and a privilege to lead this company, but it's not lost on me that I'm in this role because of the tragic and unexpected loss of my friend and mentor Arne. I'm not sure any of us were prepared for it. We knew he had a tough fight in front of him, but we absolutely thought he was coming back to us, and it was a terrible blow, obviously, to his family, to his extended Marriott family, and I think to the industry more broadly. And we've had to balance grieving over his loss with the realities of the pandemic and the impact that it's had both on our industry and our business.
And when you are going through this, when you're taking over from a CEO who is so widely known, branded with the company, someone that you worked with for a very long time, how do you step into those shoes? Is there do you start making calls right away? Do you let Tony's, do you let Arnie's, what Arne had put into place, does that stay for a long time? At what point do you start saying, I now need to start doing things as the CEO versus carrying out what Arne already had in place?
Well, almost from day one, and I'm sure we'll get the chance to talk about Arne a little bit. There are a variety of lessons I had the privilege to learn during my 25 years working with him. One of those, though, he used to talk quite often about someday, whoever his successor was would probably have an easier time following him than he had following Bill Marriott, a real icon in the industry. And so he talked at length about when he was privileged to be appointed the first non-family member CEO. He didn't try to be Bill Marriott. He certainly was guided by Mr. Marriott's wisdom and advice, but he could only be Arne. He couldn't be Mr. Marriott. And I think I've tried to carry that forward. I'm not Arne. I've got different style, but certainly his focus on putting our people first, on taking care of our guests, of being cognizant of the challenges that our owners and franchisees face in the face of the pandemic. Those are good guiding principles for me as I took the reins a year ago.
Let's talk about some of those challenges, and then I would love to get back to talk a little bit more about Arne and the transition. This has been obviously incredibly challenging 2 years. But Marriott is making a number of plans for what you see as an expansion. If I'm not mistaken, you've got about 200,000 rooms under construction right now. Where is the growth? Are there places where you are more optimistic than other places? How do you see the world opening up for Marriott?
Well, you won't be surprised to hear that broadly, I am enormously optimistic about the future of travel and tourism, and certainly the future for Marriott. I think we've learned a few lessons over the last 2 years, And it's interesting. You hear so many folks in the industry talk about how leisure demand has been leading the recovery. And while that is certainly true, that is not a pandemic specific phenomenon. If you look back at the couple of years prior to the start of the pandemic, leisure demand was actually growing about 4 times more rapidly than what we were seeing in terms of business demand. And so as I think about the future, continuing to grow our portfolio in leisure destinations, continuing to think about our product offerings and our service offerings, not only to be focused on leisure guests, but also to recognize that trip purpose is blending before our eyes. You're seeing more and more folks who are combining both business trips and leisure trips into a single trip. And as a result, they have different needs even from day to day during their visit. They may spend Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday wearing the hat of a business traveler. And come Friday, they may pivot, take off their dress shoes, put on flip-flops, and become more of a leisure travel. And our products have to be prepared for that. And certainly our service delivery has to be prepared for that evolution.
So let's talk about both those. First, you said that that leisure was building up even before the pandemic. Is that because, did you see a change in how people were traveling for business, or was it just that there was a boom in leisure?
I think more the latter. Mm-hmm. I think we saw a little bit around the edges, a change in how they traveled for business, but we really just saw this explosive growth in an appetite for leisure travel. And it influenced some of our strategic moves. Our entry into all-inclusive, for instance, was something we initiated long before we'd ever heard of COVID-19, but it's obviously a strategic decision we made that has served us well.
In terms of this blended leisure and business, I've been reading about this. It seems to be this trend. I can't quite get my head around it. I can't get my head around it as a traveler, this idea of going from the conference room to the poolside with the family. How does it change how you build your hotels, or how they're run, or what kind of services you have to provide? Does it change anything, or is it more just a matter of understanding that a guest is changing his or her own mindset?
Dan, you make a great point. Early in the pandemic, I mean, I've traveled for business for the entirety of my 35-year career. I can pack a rollerboard bag for a week trip to Asia in my sleep. And so to pivot to this blended trip purpose, even for me, was a bit of an adjustment. But now that I've done it a few times, other than having maybe to be a bit more thoughtful about what and how you pack, it's relatively seamless. As it relates to product, there are maybe a few pivots, but I think it's more about service delivery and the offerings that we provide to a guest whose trip purpose might evolve during the course of their visit with us.
Got it. I want to give some shout outs. We have a lot of people tuning into this live right now. So let me get some hellos here. We've got Brandy from Pennsylvania, Rachel from California, Matthew and Caitlin from Canada, Estella from Mexico, all joining in.
Great.
And for everyone tuning in right now, so you've got a worldwide audience here. And this is working. We have Marriott CEO Tony Capuano on here. Please continue to drop your questions into the chat, and we will get to those in a second. Tony, going back to this question about travel and business, leisure and business travel, with about 20% of your revenue coming from meetings historically, is it a problem if are you able to move towards a more leisure or blended leisure business world fast enough for the business to be okay?
Well, we think so. My answer might be differently if my point of view was that business travel was evaporating permanently or group business was never coming back. But if you heard some of the statistics we shared last week on our fourth quarter earnings call, you look at both business travel and group travel. In the fourth quarter, they were down about 30% as compared to the fourth quarter of 2019. But that was a 10 or 11 percentage point improvement over quarter three. So while business and group have not come back as rapidly as we would like, make no mistake, we are seeing steady recovery in each of those segments.
And one of the things that you pointed out also was that you are seeing steady recovery, but a different kind of recovery, that a lot of these bookings are happening almost last minute. Is that a pandemic related change, or do you see that as being the new way group travel happens?
It's a good question. I suppose if you invite me back 2 or 3 years from now, I'll have a graph for you and we can track it. We saw booking times shorten dramatically in the early days of the pandemic. As recovery has commenced, we have seen them incrementally start to lengthen. We're not back to the booking windows we saw in 19, but our expectation is we'll continue to see those windows lengthen a bit.
And do you see, you have, as the largest hotel company in the world, you are able to see how different countries are reacting in different ways, how consumers are reacting in different ways. Is this a global return to travel, or are you seeing regional or geographic differences in how people are embracing travel or leisure?
It's a terrific question. And as I think you know, we've got a footprint in about 140 countries. And because our business is one that in effect sells our inventory over again each and every day, we've got reams and reams of empirical data that help us discern the trends by market. And so I'll give you a few examples. During our second quarter earnings call, we talked with great enthusiasm about the fact that business in Greater China was back. Across business, leisure, and group, we were above 2019 levels. However, if you compare that with our fourth quarter earnings call, China was the only major market where we didn't see sequential quarter over quarter improvement in revenue per available room. Why? The government there has taken a much more aggressive zero COVID approach. And so you've seen instances where 100 cities of significance are closed for a period of time. You contrast that with a market like the UAE, which has been quite aggressive in reopening. And our data for the fourth quarter, market performance and demand and rate in the UAE in the fourth quarter were meaningfully ahead of where we were in 2019. And so we see ebbing and flowing as markets think about how they're going to reopen. The thing that gives us so much optimism, though, Dan, is as well as we've recovered over the last couple quarters, that recovery has been almost entirely on the shoulders of domestic travel. And now we get quite enthused as we see more and more borders opening, and we think about the prospects of cross-border travel accelerating that momentum. And what's really exciting, even some of the markets that were most aggressive in locking down in the early days of the pandemic, Australia, New Zealand, the Cayman Islands, they're all starting to reopen. And I think that's really great news for our industry and our business.
Well, some of this pent up demand to leave borders and to travel and to have experiences is also affecting the workforce. And everyone who is on this interview has heard of the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. People saying like this: I'm ready to leave the room I've been trapped in the last 2 years. I'm ready for a new job. I've been sheltering in my job for a couple of years. I need to experience something different. How I've worked is not how I want to continue to work. How is that Great Reshuffle affecting you, and is it different across different countries?
It certainly varies in some cases materially by market. But I would tell you, I think it's impacting us in two very distinct ways. If the above property level, so not our frontline associates in the hotels, but in regional offices or in our headquarters in Washington, I think we are embracing the fact that office work is evolving and changing. I don't know that we'll ever get back to Monday through Friday in the office every day. I think we believe strongly that in-person interaction among our associates helps us strengthen and nurture our culture. It allows for mentoring. It allows for creativity and collaboration. And so you'll see more and more of our above property folks coming back to the office. At the same time, you really can't work remotely in a hotel. We are in the service business. We're in the business of taking care of our guests. And so at the property level, we have seen, I think, a bit of the confidence in the travel and tourism sector as a terrific industry to grow a career has been shaken a little bit by the events of the last 2 years. And it's incumbent on us at Marriott It's incumbent on my colleagues in the other hospitality companies, and it's incumbent on organizations like the American Hotel and Lodging Association to do everything we can to refresh our narrative and remind folks that it's an amazing industry, it's a fun industry, and it's an industry where real careers can be built. When I talk with Bill Marriott, one of his greatest sources of pride as he tours hotels around the United States, more than 50% of our general managers started in hourly positions. And the ability to build those long careers. I'll be with our communications people later this week filming a congratulatory video for one of our general managers who's celebrating his 50th anniversary with the company. And so I think getting those stories out there, helping prospective future associates understand why this is such an exciting business and why Marriott is such a compelling place to work is a really important priority for us.
And does that work? Does that sell work? I mean, if you look at some of these stats, Gen Z is changing jobs faster than any generation. I think the average is something like 2 years. What they are asking for out of jobs is very different. Does this idea of saying we can build you a career path, you can stay with us for a very long time. You look at people who are at the top and they have worked from the hourly position all the way up. Is that and then they contrast it with the fact that like 20% of the jobs lost during the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, we're in travel and leisure. Does that balance out? Or are you finding that people are saying, yes, I like what you're saying, I want to invest my career and my life with Marriott, or are they pulling back a little bit?
Not everyone, but when we get the chance to really talk in detail, we do see a lot of folks that are excited about that. And to your point, while you saw extraordinary job loss in the early days of the pandemic, it should not be lost on any of us that the last jobs report that came out for the US, I think it was 150 or 180,000 of the jobs that were created were in the travel and tourism sector. So I think it's a sector that is of great appeal. And I think those that are drawn to that, they've got some decisions to make about, do I want a job, or do I want a place that if I really enjoy the industry and the culture and the values of my employer align with me, is it a place that I can reasonably believe I've got opportunities for upward mobility and for career growth? And I think Marriott really checks all of those boxes.
Interesting. So it sounds like you are looking for people who are already inclined to want to work in this space, who have some kind of love for it or desire to be around guests, and that makes the sell easier. Then you are just trying to.
Although interestingly, because of all the job loss we saw, I think last year just in the U.S. we hired more than 50,000 new associates. Almost by definition, not all of those associates necessarily had deep experience in service or in hospitality. It's one of the reasons our robust training programs, our online training platforms that we offer our associates are so valuable, because the ones that express an interest in the industry but don't necessarily have a great deal of experience, we've got a terrific toolbox of developmental tools to help them get up the learning curve quickly.
Got it. And then how do you are not just a CEO overseeing your own employees. You have franchisees and owners who have their own staffs that they have to motivate, they have to hire for. Are you finding that you have to bring these franchisees over to understand what this new world of work looks like, or how to entice people to come back in, or do they just get it?
They get it. We are very deliberate in the partners that we grow with, and it goes well beyond their financial capabilities. We want to align ourselves with partners who embrace some of Marriott's core values about putting people first and providing genuine care to our guests. What I will tell you, though, is because of the nature of our business model, as you describe it, it is critical that Marriott leaders around the world, when we're making decisions, we've always got to evaluate those decisions really through three distinct lenses. How will this decision impact our associates? How will this this decision impact our guests? And how will this decision impact our owner community? And it is sometimes a complex riddle. And we're certainly not perfect, but I think the team around the world understands we've got to try to thread the needle and make decisions about our business that reflect our focus and our care for each of those three critical constituencies.
Antonio, those critical constituencies, is that stack ranked? Do you go through it one by one? How are we meeting each one of these?
For almost every decision we make, we've got folks around the table that almost acts as a proxy advocate for each of those constituents. And so someone will tee up an idea, and we'll have several of our leaders say, I think the owner community's reaction if we go that route will be A. And then we'll have our HR team, our colleagues in HR, chime right in and say, the potential impact of a decision like that to our workforce, to our associates, is something else. And then we'll have our consumer insights team who are talking to our guests every day saying, I think I would not make that decision because this would be the potential implications of that decision on how our guests feel about us and their loyalty to our company.
Wow, it's like you're running the UN Security Council. You got to balance all of these various parties out and try to figure out where.
I'm not sure it's that weighty. I've always characterized it that every morning all of the Marriott leaders show up and there's a Rubik's Cube on our desk. And we've got to try to solve that Rubik's Cube around some of these important decisions to make sure we're considering the implications to all three of those groups.
Got it. All right. Well, let's do some more shout outs. We got a bunch of people who are on the live stream. Richard from Long Island, Irene from Kenya, Lori from Boston, Diane, a Marriott general manager in Orange County, says, "You rock, Tony." Laura, a Marriott global sales manager in Mexico, says that they are grateful for the opportunities Marriott offers for development and growth. Fate says, I've always combined business and leisure travel, usually taking a day or two after the business event to do sightseeing. I think it would be a great idea for hotels to sell this as a package to businesses as a perk for their employees who have to travel. That's a good idea. And then we have one question coming in. Erica asks, as business and leisure travel blend, do you expect hotel bookings to drop and homes and villa bookings to rise?
It's a great question. I mean, we launched a homes and villas business before the unfolding of the pandemic. In 2019, I think round numbers, we had about 3,000 global listings. We saw that business and the size of our platform grow exponentially during the pandemic. We're, I think, about 60,000 listings today. We wanted to have that available. We hear from our customers that for very specific trip purposes, a full home is a better solution for them. It might be a multi-generational vacation. It might be a family reunion where they want common spaces within their accommodations to mix with each other. And so we want to keep them in that Marriott ecosystem. But we also hear loud and clear from our customers. They like the staffing levels we have in our hotels. They like the availability of room service and doormen and business centers. And so I think what we hear from our guests, give me the sort of accommodation I want for my wide range of trip purposes. And the launch of Marriott Homes and Villas is just another platform to try to accommodate one type of trip purpose.
Great. Tony, you've been very vocal on LinkedIn about a number of different areas. And it's been interesting to me to follow you because I'm used to CEOs having a voice about 1-2 topics. And I see you really covering a bunch of areas. So you've talked about food insecurity, human trafficking awareness, LGBTQ+, youth homelessness, COVID-19 vaccine encouragement, military veteran appreciation, civic engagement, and anti-racism and climate change concerns. Would love to understand how you think about when is the right time to bring your voice into a conversation, where you think it is the role of the CEO or just your role personally to say, I'm taking a stance on these particular issues.
Yeah, well, let me start, Dan, maybe at the risk of giving you a bit of a commercial. As a newly seated CEO, LinkedIn has been such a great platform for me, particularly in the early days of my tenure when so many borders were locked down. And I was trying to communicate with our associates around the world, but didn't necessarily have the luxury of getting out there and shaking hands and giving hugs and meeting with our folks face to face. I can tell you that when these issues come up, I convene sort of my informal council of my colleagues, and we talk about it. I tend to use a few filters. If it is an issue that I think impacts a broad swath of our associates around the world, I think it's important they know where the company stands. There have been instances and issues that I didn't necessarily thought made sense, and I may deal with them from a personal perspective, but not on the Marriott platform. But when you think about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of folks that put a Marriott name badge on every morning when they go to work, they care deeply about what our company stands for. And many of the issues you described, we've got innumerable number of associates that are passionate about those issues. And I think it strengthens their commitment to the company when they know the company really stands for something of substance.
And that's so different than the way CEOs used to operate. I was talking to a CEO of a large tech company recently who said this generation, the CEOs who have had to take over during this pandemic are a different kind of CEO. We've had to deal with thinking about employee health and about not just thinking about, but actually acting in a very forceful way on racial issues, climate change issues. We have to not just talk at our employees. They expect us to listen back or else they're going to quit. They are going to, the great resignation, the great reshuffle. This is very real. Do you think that, and this goes back to where we started this whole conversation, are you, because of the environment, do you have to be a different kind of leader than even Arne was?
Well, I'd say two things. Number one, I thought Arne was an outspoken, a passionate, a vocal leader about issues. And as you point out, there are different styles of CEOs. I think in many ways, I'm following Arne in that he knew it was important to speak about issues that our associates around the world cared about. And I've continued to do that. I think the other point you make, though, that really resonates with me, I've got a daughter in college and she's in hospitality school. And so I get the chance to speak with her. I speak to her classmates. And when these kids are coming out of school, our prospective future associates, they're human beings. So they care about job title, they care about pay, they care about those things. But they are selecting employers because they care so deeply about, I want to find an employer whose values and priorities are aligned with mine. And I think it's another reason that causes me to be thoughtful about those issues and those priorities when I should use a platform like LinkedIn and share my point of view.
Super interesting. And it's just fascinating to see how employees change executive actions. And I think that we often think of the business world as being people at the top are making decisions that affect everyone else, but it really is not a one-way street at all.
Well, and Dan, I know you've spent time with many folks from Marriott. We're coming up on our 95th anniversary this year. And one of the core principles that Bill Marriott's father put in place was this notion of take care of your associates. Because if you take care of your associates, they'll take care of the guest, and the guest will come back again and again. And that is a philosophy and an attitude that has served us so well for nearly a century. We've got to think about our associates. What makes them passionate? What makes them excited to get up and come to work every day? What makes them proud to be aligned with a company like Marriott? And I think speaking out on some of these really weighty issues is one part of that calculus.
Tony, I always like to end these with career advice. What do you say to people who come to you and say, hey, I don't even know what I want to do. I don't know whether I want to be in the hotel industry. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure even what to do with my career. Yeah. What do you tell the people who are just kind of, they don't have the path yet? How do you help them find a path?
Yeah, I'd say three things. And I want to give my friend Arne full credit on the first two. I encourage them to be intellectually curious, to ask questions, to read, to listen, to really understand. Second, I tell them to learn to be a good listener. Unfortunately, I think for business and for the world, active listening is a skill that's in short supply. So I always encourage them to be an active listener. And the other thing I tell them is to be optimistic. Prospective associates that are looking at our industry, they don't have the opportunity I have to look at all the data and to hear from hundreds and hundreds of guests a day. It is a fabulous industry. People love to travel. Since the dawn of time, the ability to explore new places, try new foods, immerse yourself in new cultures, conduct commerce in a face-to-face way, consummate a transaction by shaking hands. These are things that have driven travel for centuries. And while current graduates coming out of school maybe aren't coming into exactly the environment they were helping for, there is extraordinary opportunity for them as they think about the ability to grow a really rewarding career in travel and tourism.
That's great. Want to read some last comments from people who are joining in. Sophia says, we should definitely embrace the new normal. There is opportunity for us to redefine what it's like to travel and to tap into new ideas and resources like how Marriott is doing. Kyle, who is a Marriott Rooms operation manager in Virginia, said Marriott's focus on upward mobility will get this great company through this time. And Jorge said, it's easy to fall in love with the hotel industry, working in the hotel industry. Bringing great memories and events to people is extremely rewarding, exactly like you were just saying, Tony. Tony, thank you so much for joining.
Jorge is a Marriott associate, because that's the kind of passion I love to hear. And Diane, get back to work in Irvine Spectrum. I know who you are. You got a great hotel. Get back there.
That's great. No, stay on LinkedIn. Keep working. Keep tuning into these. You can do both.
You can do both. Exactly.
Tony, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to continue to talk to you as you keep guiding this company, and we'll see what you learn and how things are changing. So thanks for spending the time.
Dan, thanks so much for having me. And for everybody that dialed in, thank you so much for joining.
All right. We release This Is Working as a podcast each episode. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can get more advice from the world's top leaders by subscribing to my newsletter using the link you see on the screen right there. I'm Dan Roth. Thanks for tuning in to This Is Working.